Hey, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to make the part 2 of the video how to make a wooden terrarium. At very first I didn't want to make this video, but some of you gave me motivation and inspiration. So now I'm going to buy new technical stuff and I see you just after. First, if you are new to my channel, sorry for my bad English, activate subtitles if you need. If you remember, we had left our tank naked at the end of the first video. Don't forget to watch it first if you have not seen it. For this second part, we are going to start by the work on the aluminium profiles. They will allow us to create the bottom ventilation and support the windows and the top glass. You can see my sketch, that makes the link to my CG model. You see 10 by 15mm corner, which come above the set. I will stick the grid just below, even if you don't see it on the screen. So I looked in store for a bar with a shape that could support the windows. I chose this one because I already used it for this type of build. But it could be another one as long as it is cut properly. Now we are going to move on to cutting out. For this one, I take the total width of the tank for my tracing. I go around with my square because my cut line has to be visible when I use the meter box. All I have to do now is to cut. Then I trace what will be removed, and that fits to the thickness of the panel, here 12mm. I make sure to see the cut lines in the meter box too. The important point is that we will stop before reaching the part that will be on front. I show you in red because I didn't film. First cut line, then what will be removed. When it is cut, I get that. When it is done, I use a lime to remove what could bother us because it does not fit necessarily at the first time where we want. At the end, all is adjusted as expected. It's okay right as left. To finish, I cut 3 corner bars. We are now jumping on a risky step. I need to avoid mistakes. Of course, if you make a mistake, you can always rebuild some of the basic material with wood pulp, but the best is to get the needed result right away. Here, the aim is to block the profile on the axis of the height to avoid possible moves under the load of the windows that I materialize by the green arrow on the screen. On the glass terrarium, I use the wedge for this, but here, to avoid waterproofing problems between two materials of different natures, I chose another option. I will dig a slot in the sides of the tank to block the profile, which I highlight by the red hatching. I need to pay attention to the height of the elements. It is essential to align the main profile not on the back panel of the ventilation, but on top of the first profile placed on it. I drew a red line so that you can see what I mean. Maybe you wonder why I do not make these holes before mounting the structure. In fact, it happens that sometimes, when assembly, you have difference between one side and the other, one higher and one lower, so the risk to see a profile which is askew at the end is true. I'm going to trace my holes, so we have 81mm for the profile and 15mm for the bottom of the tank, for a total of 96mm. If I make a test with the square, it looks okay, everything is aligned. I finish my tracing. I don't forget to think about the thickness of the profile, it will give me the deepness to dig. I use a wood chisel to do this. When it is done, I put back my profile, and all is okay. Before painting, I added wood pulp to avoid seeing as much as possible the seams on the most visible part, namely the top front. Then I used 80 and 120 sanding grit to get a slick surface. If I remember, at the end of the first video, I finished by using 120 sanding grit sandpaper, so I will sand with 220 sanding grit sandpaper to get the slickest surface possible. It's long, not interesting, and it makes a lot of dust, but it's necessary to get a good surface condition. I remove all the dust using wet paper towel, and I can go to the next step. I'm going to drop a simple white wood undercoat. So be careful, I'm not a specialist in painting or finishing, so it's possible that I'm not working correctly, but it should be okay. When it is finished, the result is not fully opaque, so I will use sandpaper and drop a second layer, so that the black paint will cover a full white surface. Until I can sandpaper, I deal with the top corners that will support the glass roof. So I check my dimensions to avoid nasty surprise, and this time I'm going to cut 45 degrees angle to get seams with better finishing. With the blanc assemblage, I get this. Now I'm going to sandpaper the first layer of undercoat using 320 grit sandpaper to get a slick surface. This is an important step if you want to get good finishing, but the same way it makes a lot of dust, so use a mask to protect you. Don't worry if you see the surface appearing underneath, it will be okay after that. After dusting, we can drop the second layer. You can see that the relief of the painting is clearly visible, so I'm going to sandpaper that second and last layer. You see after and before, it's not perfect because I don't want to wait 50 years to make it, but it is already much slicker. For black paint, I took this standard paint in DIY store, but if you have the budget, go instead in a professional store. It's a monolayer paint, however, I will need to make a second layer. I'm almost done with this boring part. According to my test, these steps are not interesting, but are essential to get a good looking terrarium. For the varnish, I go the same way, it is a standard wood varnish. Same step as for painting, in 2 layers with a mini roll. The tanks look like this, and we can finally go back to the most interesting part. I'm going to make the bottom ventilation part and start working on the top of the terrarium too. I use sealant for both, because given the plurality of materials we face, I trust in the sealant more than standard aquarium sealant. This stuff is neutral too and not more expensive. No mistake allowed, I will use as much masking tape as necessary to avoid messing up everything I've done before. I start with the corner, and if you remember the beginning of the video, the smallest part is on top. Make sure you have a sealant line that covers the edge of the front panel. Here it's okay. Then I move on the front bar that will support the windows. When I have squeezed and when nothing moves anymore, I remove the masking tape quickly and I use adhesive tape, and it's okay. Then I mount the top corners, the process is the same, so no comment. I'm going back to the bottom ventilation. I'm going to use a tiny section of aluminum bar to be used as a wedge. For the grid, the beginning of the process is the same as in my video on making a glass terrarium. I take the width of what will be covered and I cut squares or rectangles. And to finish the work on the grid, I fold to 90 degrees the part that exceeds, and I get that. It makes a clean finish. Then I stick in advance, because after that I will no longer have access with the caulking gun, and I put my grid. Now I can stick and put the first profile. I don't forget to put my finishing wedges before the silicone trees. And I can put my second profile. My bottom ventilation is done. The next step is to lay my PVC profiles for the windows. I make it exactly the same way as in my glass terrarium tutorial. Once again, there is only to wait for drying. I didn't film this, because no added value, but I also glue profiles that support the lid. It becomes interesting, I just got what I need to waterproof the tank. I filmed the unpacking to fill the time I present you the product. First, I want to make it clear that's not a product placement or a partnership. The manufacturer and the supplier do not even know that I exist, so I paid this product with my own money, so no problem at all. If I present this item, it is just because for me it's amazing. This item is called Impermax. This is a 2.5 liter pot. Impermax is a waterproof product based on a monoconstituent polyurethane and is okay with sanitary criteria of water quality for drinking water. In other words, you can use it for drinking water supplies and by extension, ponds for koi carp in your garden for example. It is used in 2 layers and it gives a waterproof material. This is exactly what we want. The brand is called Raystone and it is made in Spain. I'm not sure if you can find this type of stuff in America or outside Europe, but I think that if you look at pond supplies, you will find a similar product. It comes in several colors, so if you have a very large tank and you have to buy several units, buy 2 different colors to be sure to cover everything. To waterproof a wooden tank, we don't have plenty solutions. Epoxy resin is commonly used, but Impermax in 2 layers will make a coating without having to dose the resin and hardener. But above all, it remains flexible and allows to absorb possible movement of the support even if the wood derivative move very little. To advance on the upper part, I choose a smaller profile to make the connection between the glass and the grid. I cut 2 lengths. I will position them as you can see, because I need more width on the side of the grid. I also prepare a space to pass future plugs, probes and so on. For this space, I use a piece of the same profile, and I cut 45 degrees. I have now the space I want. Don't forget to make it larger if you want to place a pump, for example. I also take the time to place windows. For your information, to estimate the total height to be cut, I proceed in the following way. I take the visible part of the door and I add 6.5mm. It permits to keep 3mm in the top profile and make the glass easy to put and remove. But to be honest, I'm annoyed with the right window. Indeed, the profile was not fully straight, probably because of the way it was stored, and I have difficulty to close the door. Now we are going to make a cap to close the cable path that I made just before. A simple triangle in expanded PVC will do the trick, but any piece of plastic will do the trick at first. Then I make a kind of glazing beads that will allow us to stick grid in a good looking way. However, my cable path at 45 degrees force me, if I want to do things right, to cut at 22.5 degrees as you can see in my sketch. And I don't have a meter box with this kind of intermediate angle, so I had to brainstorm to find a solution. Finally, I drew a template with a protractor and everything works fine. The hardest part is cutting freehand with the hacksaw, but stop on the edge of the meter box, it's okay. When all my items are cut, I just check that everything fits properly. My little cap, and I am done. I had to get into the first layer of waterproofing, but no luck, the weather sucked. Never mind, I do this inside with a mask, and I open window to ventilate. Impermax requires to be mixed and should be allowed to rest for 10 minutes to avoid air bubble. I film for you from the inside, but I struggle a little to do it properly while filming, being careful not to put product on DSLR and being careful not to wide the lens, so I do it the bad way to show you the beginning, but I will do it correctly between takes. The goal here is to cover the bottom of the profile to prevent moisture from going into the plywood. Then don't forget the seams with the corners, and the same with the window profiles. When the first layer is finished, it is not easy to show you because everything is dark, but the whole surface on the inside is covered. I waited 36 hours as required in technical specifications, and dropped my second layer. As the product is all black, it is difficult to photograph or film, but basically this is what I get. I forgot to say it and I didn't make it, but if you can, make a good seal on the inner edge of the tank, not for waterproofing purpose, but to break angles and facilitate the work of Impermax. You won't see it in the video, but during the drying, I made the holes for the future spray nozzle of 10mm in the glass plate. To fix my glass plate, I use sealant only on the needed places. Then I drop the sealant on the profile on which the glass stands. And I drop the glass plate. I'm setting up the second profile. I cut out my piece of mesh. I just have to cut the 45 degrees angle. Then I drop the glue. I place the mesh. I put sealant again to fix the glazing beads. And I drop the different parts. Sorry for my hands, which are hiding the mess. I need to clean all the stuff with acetone as quickly as possible. It is nice, isn't it? To finish, I make a final line of sealant and I smooth it to get something clean. I put my cap back in place. And finally, I put my lid on. I throw a little bit of water to show you that I have no doubt about the waterproofing of the product. Now I'm done. So what we get? So what must we choose between glass and wood? That's the question. The wood is easier to work with, but clearly require more finishing to be aesthetic, unless you don't mind having an OSB or MDF terrarium not covered in your living room, but that it is not my taste. So it depends on what you want to build, your skills, your tools, and your budget, because if you count painting, varnish and the rest, it quickly compensates the price of basic materials. If I did not crash in the budget, I spent about 300 euros, including the stuff of the first video. I hope you liked this video because it took me a lot of time. Another time, sorry for my bad English. In the next part, I will create the lighting if this video make enough views. If you like it, leave a comment to support me, like and subscribe, and take care of you. Bye!